Coming up on Bridge City News, the Alberta government announces that beginning this fall, masks will be mandatory for students grades 4 through 12. BCN has an exclusive one-on-one interview with Alberta Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer, who discusses new legislation to protect Albertans. And we hear from the sister of Marshall Iwasa, who has an update into the disappearance of her brother, who's not been heard from since last November.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The City of Lethbridge announced that beginning Friday, masks will be mandatory for anyone working in publicly accessible spaces within the City of Lethbridge and operated indoor facilities. And they will include City Hall, the Galt Museum, Fort Whoop-Up, the Helen Schuler Nature Centre, the Lethbridge Park and Ride Transit Terminal, the Airport Terminal, the Lethbridge Public Library, both downtown and crossings locations, and all ice arenas. The use of mandatory masks or face coverings for passengers using Lethbridge Transit came into effect today. The city is also looking into mandatory masks at CASA, swimming pools, the Lethbridge Animal Shelter, and the Cor Van Ray YMCA. The province announced today that over the past 4 days, there were 303 new COVID-19 cases and 5 new deaths. To date, 9,750 Albertans have also recovered from the virus. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Henshaw, says since Friday, more than 34,000 tests have been conducted, and the numbers keep going down.
We have heard reports from communities across the province of people responding to the call to be serious about COVID restrictions, and I think that these dropping numbers are encouraging, but there is no easy path forward except to continue to follow those restrictions. So even though the numbers are dropping, this is not an indication that COVID is over. It's an indication that our hard work is paying off collectively, and we need to continue that hard work.
The province announced today that when school returns this fall, mask use for grades 4 through 12 will be mandatory for both students and staff. Government officials say each person will receive 2 reusable masks. More than 1.6 million masks will be dished out to 740,000 students and 90,000 staff across the province. Education Minister Adriana LaGrange says the safety for all involved is priority number 1.
After continuing to work with Dr. Dina Hinshaw's team and Alberta Health, emerging evidence has made it clear that masks can play an important role in limiting the spread of COVID-19 in our schools. As a result, mask use for students in grades 4 to 12, as well as all school staff, will be mandatory when school returns for the 2020-21 school year. Staff will be required to wear masks in all settings where physical distancing cannot be maintained, and students will be required to wear them in all shared and common areas such as hallways and on school buses.
LaGrange added that exceptions will be made for students and staff who cannot wear a mask due to certain medical needs. So how are the teachers feeling today about the announcement? Alberta Teachers Association President Jason Schilling says the news about masks is welcomed because teachers do want to return to the classroom, but they want to do so safely. He says there are still more questions, however, that need to be answered.
How we're going to address those class size issues, talking about moving, even just the simple things of the course of what school is like in the day of moving through the building, recess, lunch, all of those things need to be figured out. And I know that school boards and principals at schools are working really hard to try to get that information around social distancing, class size, cohorting, funding, and how all of that stuff is still yet to be resolved. There's lots of models that we can look at to get creative about how we do the re-entry to school. So you're seeing examples in BC, you're also seeing them in Ontario, where your students from 9 to 12 are coming every other day. They're staggered, and that's how they're working at 50% capacity to address the class size. We need to hire more teachers in this province. That is a well-documented concern prior to the pandemic to address class size issues, because having a social distancing factor in a classroom that is overcrowded is just not feasible. It's not realistic.
It is no secret that parents have had mixed emotions about sending their kids back to school in the fall. BCN's Jeanette Rocher spoke with one parent who is not satisfied with the province's measures of safety in the classroom and choosing to continue homeschooling until better practices are put into place.
Christina Esiche helps her 6-year-old son Andrew with an arts and crafts project. It's just one of the many activities and assignments she's had to design for him since COVID-19 closed schools last March.
I mean, it was abrupt, obviously, and it took a lot of changes, and we just sort of adapted together to figure out what we were going to do.
But Esiche isn't complaining. She says she's going to continue to homeschool her 2 school-aged kids this upcoming school year. Much of her decision stems from her dissatisfaction with the province reopening schools and the measures they're taking, or not taking in her case, to practice safety.
The idea of masks is great. In public, we do it. But I think all day at school is just unrealistic and sort of unfair and sort of counterintuitive to the safety of the health. And then also there's no cap on class sizes, so that doesn't make much sense either. To me, I don't feel comfortable with it. I just don't. So I think it's best to keep them home, at least for the year.
A student herself working towards a master's degree, Esiche was doing online school herself. She says she realizes this isn't necessarily a decision every parent can take or would want to take.
Because it's so unknown, it made me really uncomfortable. Sending children back into an environment that is heavily stressed. It's not fair to the students or the teachers. And for the boys, it's been really nice to be home with them and see them, feel comfortable.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche.
As Stage 2 of Alberta's relaunch progresses, the province announced that it has ended its Masks for Albertans program on Sunday. Around 40 million non-medical masks were distributed, with more than half of them handed out at A&W, McDonald's, and Tim Hortons locations. Out of the 40 million masks that were handed out, 5 million were provided for 21 transit services in Alberta. The province also says 2.5 million were also delivered to more than 1,000 places of worship for use by members of their congregations. Even though Ottawa's new app for alerting people they have been near someone who's tested positive for COVID-19 only works on newer phones, our country's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says that means gadget-loving younger people in risky situations are likely to be able to use it.
Just to sort of look at it from a public health perspective, you're right in that there could be people who don't have access to phones, who don't have a latest phone, who may not be able to use this. But I still think that it is as many people who can download it and use it as possible will make the app more successful.
The province says it will be investing $10 billion into infrastructure projects. Now, much of that will be allocated to areas of southern Alberta, including Taber and the St. Mary's Irrigation District. 2 ministers made the announcement earlier today. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly has the details.
The provincial government is calling it the Alberta Recovery Plan, a response to the pandemic that involves aggressive infrastructure projects throughout the province. $40 million in funding alone will be allocated towards 4 major projects in the Taber region. The projects include flood mitigation, engineered wetland initiatives, and corrosion control to ensure safe drinking water.
We increased our spending by 40%. So earlier in budget 2020, we budgeted $7 billion on capital investments.
So that does nothing but enhance the area for quality of life and for future and longevity for the Taber community and area.
Next on the docket, Devin Durishan, Minister of Agriculture, announced $2.6 million in irrigation and maintenance funding for the St. Mary's district.
We want to be able to expand it because of its economic impact, the jobs that go along with it, and the fact that we can have more food security here in Alberta by being able to produce more agriculture products here in the province of Alberta.
A big one that's an ongoing need for us, or desire for us, is to convert open ditch or open canal irrigation into now closed pipeline. And we do that to be able to move water much more efficiently.
Durishan and Infrastructure Minister Prasad Panda talked about their plans to work together and highlight Southern Alberta's world-class agriculture sector.
It's time for some good news, and the potential that irrigation has in Alberta is incredible and is that good news story.
Irrigation is going to be playing a huge part in our major strategy down here, which is building a world-class agri-food business. We've been talking about getting Albertans back to work. This is going to start with that.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The Alberta government recently brought forth legislation that would protect rural property owners from trespassers. Alberta Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer says it was important for the province to stick up for farmers and ranchers who are targeted by protesters who have an agenda.
You go to every community and you hear a story like this where people they're being targeted. Our farmers in Alberta are amazing at what they do. They follow the highest of standards, yet they're being targeted by these small special interest groups that don't like farming. They don't like farmers for some reason. They don't like how animals are treated. You can't keep these people happy. You can't negotiate with them. So yeah, we put in place penalties as well, where if you go and trespass on a farmer's property and you're going in there like this is an occupation of their property and their land. You're really making sure that we can go after those organizations to say, no, not in Alberta.
Catch the full interview with Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer coming up after Business News. Applications are being accepted by the Community Foundation of Lethbridge by nonprofit groups severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The organization announced its first round of grant funding designated to support charities working on the front lines of the pandemic. To date, the Community Foundation has doled out close to $800,000 in funding specific to COVID-19 response and recovery. The group's executive director, Charlene Davidson, says charities working with vulnerable populations are eligible to apply for grants online anytime before September 8th. For more information, you can visit the Community Foundation's website. One lucky Albertan is a millionaire after yesterday's 50-50 draw at the Edmonton Oilers Chicago Blackhawks hockey game. The jackpot grew to $3.2 million, and the winner will take home more than $1.6 million. The ticket holder has 3 business days to come forward and claim their prize. Alberta changed the rules this year to make 50-50 tickets available to all residents online to help support charities that benefit through the sales of those tickets. The search for Marshall Iwasa continues. The Calgary man has not been seen from his family since November 17th of last year. Paige Fogan is Marshall's sister, and she says her family recently returned from Pemberton, British Columbia, where Iwasa's burnt-out truck was discovered. She says her family is frustrated that police are not treating this as a criminal investigation, but instead of a missing persons case.
There are items up there that I've identified that are not Marshall's. And so that's frustrating, for us to hear that they don't believe anyone else was up there, because there are items that are definitely not Marshall's that were at the scene. And so that's something that we've been pushing for, we don't think he was ever up there by himself, or maybe even not ever up there. They were able to get into his financial records and found that, nothing significant was found. That includes no gas stops to get his vehicle there.
Catch the entire interview with Paige Fogan and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our program. With more trips being planned around the province and country due to the COVID-19 pandemic forcing a shutdown at the border, many people are planning long road trips. Mark Whitehead with the Alberta Motor Association says that you need to be aware of what to bring in an emergency preparedness kit in case you have a vehicle breakdown.
In an emergency kit, you would want things such as booster cables, blankets, carry water with you as well. Make sure you have a few snacks in there. You also want to have maybe a few triangles, something that'll make yourself a little bit more visible on the side of the road. Just any little thing like that. Cell phone chargers are also great. You basically want to have everything in there that you could possibly think of that you may need if you are in a situation where you are stranded and without help for a while.
Whitehead says before you head out, make sure to check your vehicle's fluids, check your oil, and to have a look at your tire pressure and tread. This year marks the 21st anniversary of the Lethbridge Corn Maze being open. As Micah Quinn explains, the Corn Maze is a special theme for this year as people head inside.
This goat perfectly captures the winding roads people will take at the Lethbridge Corn Maze.
So we have a 10-acre corn maze. There's 3 different mazes inside this maze, so you have a choice of doing all 3 or just one. There is a big maze that takes the longest, that's the hardest maze, that has no clues in it, and the idea is to find your way from the entrance to the tower in the middle. Then there is a kids maze, that's the smallest maze and is of course the easiest one. And we also have a trivia maze where you can answer questions this year about hockey, since we have a hockey theme. And if you answer the question right, it will send you the right way. If wrong, it sends you the wrong way, and eventually you come out by the tower again.
This year's theme for the Corn Maze is hockey, and the Lethbridge Hurricanes are featured with their team logo and a hockey player inside of the Corn Maze.
Yeah, we do have a hockey player cut out inside the maze, so you can walk through his legs and his body and his head. We have the logo cut out as well, and we have hockey pucks everywhere. So if you look from the top, you see all little pockets, or pucks, I guess. And on the ground they are about 12 feet around.
Slingerland says there has been great reaction over the years to the corn maze.
Parents with children that were children themselves when they came out the first time, so that's neat to see. But we have a lot of positive reactions, great place outside they say, and lots of things to do. So.
The Lethbridge Corn Maze also has a petting zoo and goat snuggling sessions. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Andrew Furey, a physician from a political family, will become the 14th Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. The son of Senate Speaker George Furey was announced as the winner of the Provincial Liberal Party leadership vote last night. He will replace Premier Dwight Ball in the top political job. Furey spoke about the tough economic times ahead due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'm calling on every Newfoundlander and Labradorian to come forward and stand together. Your passion and strength are needed now more than ever before in our history. And while I'm so excited to be standing here, my mind is racing about tomorrow, about the future. I'm ready to get going.
South of the border, protests continued in Portland, Oregon last night. City officials declared that the protests were declared an unlawful assembly as protesters once again confronted police who had taken the place of federal officers in the area. The protests have spanned many issues, including police accountability, racism, homelessness, and immigration rights. Tropical storm Isaiah spawned multiple tornadoes, including one that caused at least one death and multiple injuries as it flattened a mobile home in Windsor, North Carolina. Lebanon's health minister says at least 60 people are dead and more than 2,500 were injured following a massive blast that rocked a port in Beirut. The explosion sent a huge mushroom cloud into the sky, damaged buildings, and blew out windows and doors. The explosion was heard and felt as far away as Cyprus, which is more than 200 kilometers across the Mediterranean. Hours later, ambulances are still carrying away the wounded, and officials say Beirut's hospitals are full. 3 men have been rescued from a tiny Pacific island after riding a giant SOS sign in the sand that was spotted from above. The men were missing in the Micronesia island chain for nearly 3 days. Nice to see that they were finally rescued. It was another beautiful day in southern Alberta today. No heat warning today, but it may return tomorrow. Full weather details are coming up. It has been a great time for farmers to start harvesting with all of the sunshine and warm temperatures. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we had some heat warnings last week and could potentially see a couple more this week. So if you're out combining, make sure that AC is working.
Yes, temperatures will continue to be beautiful over the next several days. Tonight, our overnight low 11 degrees. We should see a light wind as well. Tomorrow, 31 degrees, lots of sunshine. It's going to feel hotter with that humidex. It'll feel about 36, and the UV index is going to be very high as well. So definitely break out that sunscreen. Overnight low tomorrow night, 15 degrees. And as we look into the 5-day forecast, we are going to see much of the same with temperatures rising as high as 32 degrees for Thursday. 22 is our high for Friday. Saturday's high at 24 degrees under sunny skies, and then 25 on Sunday with a mix of sun and cloud. Partly cloudy skies also expected for Monday with a high of 24 degrees. So according to the almanac, our average high for this time of year, 26 degrees. So we're definitely in that range and beyond at times. Average low this time of year, 11. The high temperature on this day was back in 1939. It was 35 degrees, and our low temperature was 4. That was in 2005. Sun rose this morning at 6:07 a.m. Just a little bit into that 6 o'clock hour as our days are getting slightly bit shorter. 9:08 is our sunset tonight. So let's take a look at what's happening on the west coast tomorrow. Lots of sunshine. Victoria's high tomorrow, 23 degrees, 25 expected in Vancouver. Lots of sunshine across Alberta tomorrow. Calgary's high 29, 30 expected over in Edmonton, and across the rest of the prairies we're going to be seeing much the same as well for Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Winnipeg's high 28 degrees with lots of sunshine. Sunny skies also expected tomorrow in Saskatoon, 28 degrees, 27 expected in Regina. Regina is under a thunderstorm watch for tonight, so they could see some rain, but into tomorrow, lots of sunshine. Now, as we move further into central Canada, mix of sun and cloud expected in Toronto with a high of 24 degrees. 24 also expected to be the high for Ottawa and Montreal, a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow in Ottawa and possible showers. We could see some thunderstorms also in Montreal. Now, there is a tropical cyclone warning in effect over in the Atlantic. We've got tropical storm Isaiah forming, and it is going to be affecting areas of New Brunswick and southern Quebec, so we could see lots of rain in that area. Fredericton's high, 30 degrees. Charlottetown as well, 29. Both of those cities under a heat warning. Lots of rain as well there too. Halifax could also see some showers with a high of 26. 22 expected to be the high in St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow with a mix of sun and clouds. So there you go. That is your weather.
Alberta and Ottawa have signed an agreement that makes major cuts to environmental monitoring of the oil sands. The deal lays out research plans for this year's field season for a joint federal-provincial program. It shows that overall funding has been cut by at least 25% to no more than $44 million this year. That is down from $58 million in 2019. No field studies are to be done on the main branch of the Athabasca River or on the wetlands, fish, or insects. The company behind the fashion brand Tristan is the latest Canadian retailer to seek court protection from its creditors. Documents posted online by trustee MNP says the move by the Montreal retailer is the first stage in restructuring. The company, founded in 1973, had long promoted that up to 30% of its clothing was Canadian-made. Frank & Oak, Reitmans, Moores, and Aldo Group are among other retailers that have filed for some form of creditor protection in recent months. Ford's Chief Operating Officer Jim Farley will be taking over the storied automaker October 1st when CEO Jim Hackett retires. The company has struggled in recent years and is in the midst of an $11 billion restructuring plan. It is designed to make Ford leaner and crank out new vehicles to replace what was an aging model lineup. As COO, the 58-year-old Farley led the company's global markets and product development. Honda is recalling 1.6 million minivans and SUVs to fix problems that include faulty backup camera displays, malfunctioning dashboard lights, and sliding doors that do not latch properly. They cover certain Odyssey minivans from 2018 to 2020, Pilot SUVs from 2019 through 2021, and Passport SUVs from 2019 and 2020. Honda traced the problems to faulty backup camera software programming, water entering door handles, and defective instrument panel software. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 198 points on the day to finish at 16,368. The Dow was up 164 points to 26,828. The S&P 500 was up 11 points to 3306, and the Nasdaq was up 38 points to finish at 10,941. Oil was up 53 cents to 41.54 per barrel. Natural gas was up 8 cents to 2.18. Gold was up 2 cents to $2,019.23 an ounce. Silver was unchanged on the day at $26 an ounce. Wheat is at $226 per metric ton, barley's at $233, canola's at $4.91, and corn is at $228 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 80 cents to $107.48. Feeder cattle were down 45 cents to $146.63, and lean hogs were up 63 cents to $49.03. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 75.04 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the province announced today that when school returns this fall, mask use for grades 4 through 12 will be mandatory for both students and staff. Government officials say each person will receive 2 reusable masks. More than 1.6 million masks will be dished out to 740,000 students and 90,000 staff across the province. Coming up, a chat with Paige Fogan, the sister of Alberta missing man Marshall Iwasa. She will have an update into the disappearance of her brother, who's not been seen or heard from in Lethbridge since last November. BCN's Jeanette Rocher will have that interview next.
It's a case that's been making headlines for over 8 months. A Lethbridge man who had been living in Calgary went missing last November. The last place 26-year-old Marshall Iwasa was known to be was here in Lethbridge in the early morning hours of Monday, November the 18th. A week later, his truck was found torched in the backcountry near Pemberton, British Columbia, but Marshall has never been found. Marshall's case has been classified simply as a missing persons case, but his family feels that this could be something else. With me now is Marshall's sister, Paige Fogan. Thank you so much, Paige, for being here today. We really appreciate it. I know it's a difficult case to talk about. So, police say that an examination of Marshall's truck in the area at the time offered no evidence that there was any criminal activity or that Marshall had ever been there. But you think maybe something different is going on there, right?
Yeah, that's something that we've been kind of pushing for since the beginning, is that, you know, we've never really seen any concrete proof that Marshall was up there, drove his truck up there, or went there on his own choice. And, you know, since the investigations continued and since we've went to the truck site, it kind of fueled our fire of pushing and saying, no, we really don't believe he went up there. The location was so difficult to get to and was so challenging even for, you know, our vehicles to get up there, that we really don't believe that he drove his own truck there on his own choice.
Right. Okay, so let's back up for a minute. You and your family recently had the opportunity for the very first time, all of you together, to travel to BC, to travel to the area where the truck is and see the truck for the first time. Describe that for me. Describe the area.
I mean, first, the drive there was so challenging. We had GPS'd it, and even just to get to Pemberton was supposed to be about 13 hours. But we ran into some problems with the weather and the roads, and we ended up taking about 30 hours for us to drive there. So it was a lot longer than we had even originally anticipated. And that was like, we were the shortest ones. A couple of my other cousins, they took about 40 hours to get there, just due to road delays, traffic backlogs. Yeah, so it was
and
really...
this is summertime weather, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is in good weather.
Yeah.
So that was challenging. And then once we got there to Pemberton, a group had reached out to us for Low BC to offer to take our family actually up to the truck site, because from our knowledge of it, you'd need 4x4s or ATVs to actually get up there to where the truck was found. So they came and they took us up there, and even for them, you know, they had to stop at a certain place, let the air out of their tires to help their vehicles be able to crawl over the rocks better.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this is a skilled 4x4 group that offered their services to us. So, you know, we were able to go up in their vehicles to get to the truck site. It was, you know, for me, going and actually driving through there was quite an experience, and I think my family, a lot of them feel the same. You know, there are spots where we were going over quite deep holes and rocks and like rivers at one point.
Crossing through water and all kinds of rough terrain, right?
Very, very challenging. And, you know, that solidified it for me essentially that I don't believe Marshall would have taken his truck up there, not on his own choice, if he ever was even up there.
Okay. Now, police were saying in their initial investigation that they think no one was there except for Marshall. So, I mean, at what point do they classify it as criminal?
That's a good question, and something that we've been trying to figure out since the beginning. There are items up there that I've identified that are not Marshall's, and so that's frustrating, you know, for us to hear that they don't believe anyone else was up there, because there are items that are definitely not Marshall's that were at the scene. And so that's something that we've been pushing for, of like, we don't think he was ever up there by himself, or maybe even not ever up there. They were able to get into his financial records and found that, you know, nothing significant was found. That includes no gas stops to get his vehicle there, because his truck would have taken a lot of fuel to get there. Yeah. I know for us, we stopped at least 3 times just to get gas. Yeah. And so, like, for that, you know, I don't believe that he was ever up there, either by his choice or on his own.
Okay. Now, Marshall was an avid outdoorsman, right? And he did enjoy hiking. How do you know for sure that he wasn't familiar with the area?
That's just through knowing him and talking to his friends and knowing like them and their experiences with him. For me, all of our hikes have been either in Hawaii or in Alberta, and a little bit in Montana, where we always have gone camping in the summer as children growing up. Right. So for us, those are our main areas that we go hiking. And then even talking with his friends, all of their hikes were in Alberta, never really in BC. He's not familiar with there. And all of the hikes that he's done, he usually goes with friends and family. Right. Like, he's never really done these hikes on his own. So he's not like a solo hiker. So that's, all of those are indicators for us that like he didn't go there. He didn't know that place.
Right. Now, you were saying there were items found near the truck that you didn't identify as Marshall's. Were they fresh items? Like, how, like, do you think they were there the whole time, or did they possibly somebody dumped them? Because it's the bottom of a trailhead, right? Do I have that correct? There's the hiking trail.
Yeah, and then you would hike up to the hut. So the way that I know those items aren't his is I identified them from the first set of photos from the hikers that found the truck. And then since then, every time I do get the opportunities to see some photos or see some items that were found at the site, either by the hikers or by police, I've still identified items that I don't believe are his each time. And so the difficult part is that I've never actually been able to go through all of the items that were found at the truck site. So we've never fully been able to see everything that was there and go through them.
Initially, the ones that Rcmp found. Yeah.
Everything, yeah. We've never been able to go through those.
Right, because they took them in as evidence, right? Okay, well, I guess that makes sense. Now, there were some items that have not been found that are pretty important personal items, right? You were mentioning.
Yeah, we've still never been able to find his wallet, his license, his backpack, his most recent cell phone, his most recent laptop that he was using from SAIT. So all of those items have never been accounted for. Things that he needed, like contact solution, the cases, those have never been found either.
Right, real personal items. Now, last time I had Cassie in here, this was a few months back, we talked about how at the time police still weren't able to access, I think because of the Missing Persons Act, right? There's a privacy issue with accessing bank records and phone records, but I think since then it's changed a little bit. They've been able to get in.
Yeah, so what we've been told by the investigator is that they were able to access a little bit of his bank records and look a little bit further back, not just the last transaction. But from there was nothing significant found, including no gas stops along the way from Calgary to Lethbridge or from Lethbridge to Pemberton.
Right, which seems impossible, right?
Which is impossible on his truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's just so puzzling is how could there not be any surveillance anywhere between here and there?
Yep, that's been something that's been really frustrating from the get-go, is not having any footage or any concrete evidence that he was ever there or on the way there or anything like that. So we've never gotten any footage. And I think, for us, that's been one thing that we've been trying to push for, is for this to be investigated as a criminal case so that we can get access to more information. Because like you mentioned, when Cassie was here, there was a lot of barriers with the Missing Persons Act in trying to get historical data of Marshall's movements prior to his disappearance. And I think that's something that we're still continuing to push for, is to get those answers and get that information. And for me, one of the biggest things would be this fire investigation that, just happened.
Yeah, no results yet, right?
Yeah, from what I've been told, they're still waiting on the fire investigator report, which is a month now, just over a month from when they were up there, and a full almost 9 months since Marshall went missing. So, I've wanted a fire investigator up there since day one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And for them to just have one, I mean, I'm happy that one went up there when they did the final search that they just completed. But, it's a little bit late, and we're still waiting for that report because, if it's considered arson, that's criminal. Right. And so that I'm hoping that we could then get it pushed into a criminal case, a criminal investigation.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems really strange that they would wait that long. Is there any idea why? I mean, to me, it seems like anybody could go up there and tamper with evidence, right?
And that was our concern from the beginning of having the trucks still being out there, is that it wasn't a controlled site, right? And that was hard having that. But yeah, we definitely would have, wanted something as soon as possible. And I really don't have an answer as to exactly why this report wasn't done in the beginning.
Right. Yes. It must be very frustrating. Now, you up until recently were living in Hawaii, so you were trying to do all this from overseas, essentially. You've made a few trips back to Lethbridge. On one of those, I believe you went through the storage room, which is essentially the last place that we know Marshall to have been, right, on that morning of November 18th. So he left your mom's house on November 17th, late in the evening, right? Yep. Went to the storage room, and no idea what he was needing or looking for?
No, I think that's something that has kind of puzzled us too,
yeah.
Even as his family. We went through the unit. First, while I was in Hawaii, the police went through the unit. And then when I came back, I went through the unit again with police. We didn't find anything significant or missing. Interesting though, we did find all of our camping gear. Right. So, if Marshall had been wanting to go camping or do some hiking or backpacking on his own, all of our gear was in our unit together. Yeah, and the other important fact is that the gear that you need to go backpacking overnight, if you're carrying all your stuff in, is very different than the gear that you take when you just drive up to a campsite and pull it out of your car. Right. It's different weights, it's different, packed differently, different sizes. And so we don't own any of that gear. Marshall's never owned day or overnight backpacking trip gear. That you carry your stuff in. He's never owned that. But all of our car camping gear is in our storage unit. So either way, if you look at it, of he was going to go hiking there overnight by himself, which is kind of what you would need to go up to the hut, he doesn't own that material. And if it was like that he was just going to camp with his regular things, all of those are in our storage unit.
Right. Interesting. Another thing that's been a big mystery sort of shrouding this is finding out that he wasn't enrolled in school like you guys originally thought. Cassie and I talked about this a few months back as well, that, you know, it was kind of a surprise, but it wasn't like a big shock. Nobody thought anything really of it. But I guess my question was, have you ever found out what Marshall was doing in September, October, and November if he wasn't in school? Nobody's ever come forward and said, hey, he was working for us, or no T4s were ever sent?
No, we've never received any information of Marshall working somewhere else or doing something different. One of the things that we did know, though, is in the summertime, he had been volunteering. He kind of described it as like volunteering for experience. So he was getting experience in the field he wanted to go into. I didn't know the name of the company that he was doing that for, though, but it was all remote. And so he had described for me some of the kind of like help desk activities he had been doing or learning from this company. So we've never heard from them. And that's something that he definitely could have continued doing in September, October. We also know that he had been working on a game online, and he had been working on that. He had put about 800 hours into it. Yes, and he had been working on it the morning that he went down to Lethbridge as well. So on the 17th.
Yeah, and when you went through the apartment, nothing jumped out at you. It didn't look like somebody that wasn't planning on ever coming back, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
His stuff was all there. It was all left in, you know, normal condition.
What do you think happened to Marshall in your heart of hearts?
You know, that's something I ask myself every day. Like, there is not a time that goes by where I don't kind of think about it and flip-flop on what I think happened. You know, whether something happened unintentionally or he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, I really don't know. I've thought about every single scenario and, you know, thought about them all the time. But I think for me, one of the things that we're trying to do is kind of stick with what we know and what we've been crossing off the list. So at this point, I can confidently say, like, I don't believe that he went up there on his own choice or maybe was never even up there. And so that's why I feel strongly that we should start looking into different locations and different things that might have happened to him and primarily push this into a criminal case.
Right. Yeah, I wonder what it would take to do that.
Yeah, that's something that we're still trying to explore and figure out, because I think this realm of missing persons is so new to us, and you know, every case is so unique. So we're still trying to figure it out of, you know, what will it take? Because at this point, he's been missing for so long. There's been no activity. His vehicle's been found in a remote area that he's not familiar with. It's been completely burnt out. You know, and maybe if they get the fire investigation report and it's arson, then we can get that push into criminal.
How did it feel going back to that spot and seeing his truck? Was it like closure for you, or did it open up more questions than answers?
It really opened up a lot of questions with the items that were found there, and just getting up to the truck site really made us be like, our family question more what could have happened to Marshall.
Right. Okay. Well, I know there's still missing posters out there and whatnot. What would you like to say to anybody who might have any information?
I think that's the biggest thing is, you know, now that we're moving into summer and people are going to be out and about, just asking if you need any posters or if you're heading out anywhere, if you can put up posters, that would be awesome. Sharing our information online, all of that's so helpful in spreading awareness and keeping some focus on Marshall and that he's still missing, and we're still looking for answers. And, you know, we really won't stop until we have answers to what happened. And so, you know, any way that people can help, sharing online is always helpful. Joining our Find Marshall Iwasa Facebook group. That's where we share all of our information and our updates. And it's actually our family that's running it. So, you know, if people are asking questions, it's usually myself or one of my family members that's actually replying to them. So it's a good platform for us to communicate with the public, and it's been so helpful to have because we've been able to get really great ideas from the public that are throwing their ideas, their thoughts out to us. You know, people that are familiar with Pemberton and the Brian Waddington hut reached out to us and said, hey, you know, it must have been someone that knew this area that got up there because it's really difficult. And all of that has been so helpful to us. Yeah. So, you know, anything people can do to help would be really appreciated.
Definitely. And it's in the hands of the Lethbridge Police Service now. So definitely call Crime Stoppers, call LPS.
Mm-hmm. If you have any tips, definitely reach 100%. Out to police.
Paige, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know this is such a difficult time for you and your family, but we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, and helping us keep the awareness of martial out there. It's so critical. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
The Alberta government recently sent its audit of Arches and the Lethbridge supervised consumption site to the Lethbridge Police Service to see if criminal charges could potentially be laid. Now, the recent audit revealed that there was $1.6 million worth of government funding that went unaccounted for. To discuss this in a little more detail is our province's Justice Minister, Doug Schweitzer, joining me from Calgary. Thanks a lot for your time, Doug.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on today.
You bet. Now, what kind of criminal charges are we potentially talking about here in regards to Arches and the supervised consumption site?
Well, when you take a look at this, I mean, it's all for now to the police to conduct their investigation, and you don't want to, kind of pre-guess what those charges could be. So it's over to the police now to conduct their investigation to determine whether or not charges would be appropriate in this situation. But it just makes your blood boil, though, when you see, taxpayer dollars go into an organization that is supposed to be used to help, the most vulnerable people in our society, those people that are struggling with addictions, and yet you're seeing trips to Portugal, you're seeing, massive six-figure salaries, and you're seeing money that they can't account for. That's the appropriate step was to send this to the police to see if charges are appropriate in the situation. It's absolutely frustrating, and you know what? And we've also heard the stories of how this has impacted the downtown of Lethbridge and what the consumption site has done to deter small businesses and make people uncomfortable in the downtown. That's why we've done a different approach with our strategy around treatment. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about drug treatment courts and other methods here to get people treatment. It's just not a matter of facilitating drug consumption. It's a matter of giving people treatment and a hope for a future.
Yeah, I know Premier Kenney's also talked about the potential of a mobile SCS being set up here in Lethbridge if potentially that Arches and the SCS shuts down as it currently stands now. Let's talk about those drug treatment courts. We're talking about opening up one here in Lethbridge. In your opinion, why are they so important?
Well, they have an amazing track record of actually getting people well. So right now in our justice system, you always hear about people that round through the system. They come in, they come out, come in and out. And what this does, it takes somebody that's truly struggling with an addiction and it puts them through a court supervised process for about 12 to 18 months where they have to come and report to a judge on a weekly basis saying, this is what I've done to get better. This is what I've done to get well.
So accountability, right?
It's a whole accountability. And for many of these people, it's actually far harder than just going and serving a sentence. Because if you go and serve a sentence, you don't have to deal with why you're there in the first place in many instances. So the success rate for those that graduate, 70% of them never come back into the criminal justice system again. So it's really a matter of getting these people well. And when they graduate, many of them reconnect with family, which is so important. They reconnect with family, they get jobs, and they have housing. So they have stability in their lives.
So some of these drug treatment courts, are we actually taking a model from somewhere in the States or Europe?
Well, they originated in the United States for the ones that we based our model on here, but we have a track record of over a decade in Calgary and Edmonton. So we've doubled the capacity in Calgary and Edmonton, and now we're reaching out and we're going to establish one in Lethbridge. We've announced one in Red Deer, and we're going to launch a few more as well in our mid-sized centers.
Now, the UCP recently announced that it has new laws in place to protect rural property owners from crime. Explain how this new law ensures protections for property owners and ensures that trespassers face consequences for their actions.
Well, we heard this loud and clear. Last year, we did a big tour talking about rural crime and hearing from Albertans as to what they were facing. So we've done lots of different pieces to tackle rural crime. We put in place a rapid force, which is going to get 400 new sheriffs on the ground. We have a new rural police funding model as well, which is going to get another 300 police officers into our rural communities. And then when it comes to property rights as well, I mean, I'm not sure if you remember the Eddie Maurice situation where an individual fired a warning shot because he was tired of his property being stolen. And then the person that initially he faced charges himself. Initially, those ultimately were dropped. But then the person came after him with a civil claim and said, you know what, I'm going to sue you now. And so really when you see this, we said, look, the balance is not working here. The people that are committing these crimes have more rights than the victims. So we've rebalanced it here in Alberta. So if you take reasonable steps now to protect your property, if you take reasonable steps and you're not charged criminally yourself, you then cannot be pursued for a civil claim. That we made sure we had the strongest property rights there. We've also enhanced trespassing laws. So if somebody continues to trespass on your property, that individual is going to face serious penalties and fines. So we really want to make sure we have the strongest possible property rights in the province of Alberta.
Now, one of these bills passed, was this precipitated because of all of the protests taking place at Hutterite turkey farms?
Oh, well, the Jumbo Valley turkey farm was one of those instances we had. But the thing is, though, you go to every community and you hear a story like this, where people, they're being targeted. Our farmers in Alberta are amazing at what they do. They follow the highest of standards. Yet they're being targeted by these small special interest groups that don't like farming. They don't like farmers for some reason. They don't like how animals are treated. You can't keep these people happy. You can't negotiate with them. So yeah, we put in place penalties as well, where if you go and trespass on a farmer's property and you're going in there, like this is an occupation of their property and their land. You're really making sure that we can go after those organizations to say, no, not in Alberta, not ever. Our farmers are the foundation of why we are even our province. So let's make sure we give them the protection they deserve.
Now, there are fines and potential jail time as well. Let's talk a bit about those.
Yeah, so we have fines in place. So initially, the fines were just kind of basic, smaller numbers. But now we actually have the ability to find the organizations that are facilitating these things. So really, when you go and look at this, Alberta has the strongest protections now in place in the country. We also, if you remember back to earlier this year when we had all those rail blockades going on, we had people blockading people's ability to get to work. And all these special interest groups, their whole goal was to shut down the economy. So what we did is we brought in place the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, where if organizations are purposely illegally blockading critical infrastructure, those organizations are going to face thousands of dollars worth of fines every single day that they do that.
Now, many rural Albertans I've spoken with are angry at the Liberal government and their new gun ban, banning over, 1,500 types of guns. These farmers and ranchers say they need the guns to protect themselves, as we talked about earlier, their families and their livestock. Since Rcmp may be 30 minutes to an hour away if an intruder shows up in a threatening manner. Now, what are you hearing? Are legal, responsible gun owners still upset?
Oh, when we met earlier this year with Minister Blair, the Minister of Public Safety, and Minister Lametti, the Federal Minister of Justice. So we met with these Liberal justice ministers, and we told them, consult widely in Alberta. Make sure that you go out there and you listen to people, and you do this thoughtfully. Instead, what we got was a rushed policy with kind of half-baked, with no clarity as to what the end result is going to be. So all of a sudden you have a bunch of people that are lawful, firearms owners, and now all of a sudden, they don't know up from down. They don't know how they're supposed to hand these firearms back in, or if they should. So really, this just caused chaos in our lawful firearm community. And on top of that, it doesn't get to the root cause of crimes that are being committed with firearms, because 80% of the crimes that are being committed with firearms, those guns are illegally brought in from the United States. So we told our federal counterparts, look, if you're serious about going after gun crime, you have to go after organized crime. On top of that, you have to make sure you crack down the border. That's really the big cause here of firearm use in Canada. And we told them that. They ignored our advice. So that's why we've brought in place a chief firearms officer for the province of Alberta. Initially, this program was run by the federal government, but we're going to take ownership of that here. More Alberta, less Ottawa. We're going to take ownership of this, and we're going to put a chief firearms officer in place from Alberta.
Now, Premier Jason Kenney is looking into a potential provincial police force similar to what Ontario is using right now, what we had many years ago. What would that look like, replacing the RCMP, Doug?
Well, this is one of those things. We had our Fair Deal panel last year and into early this year that went out and talked to Albertans, and they came back recommending that Alberta set up an Alberta Police Service here for the province to replace the RCMP. So right now, my department is looking through, what does that mean? What is the cost of that going to be? What's the infrastructure that we have to set up? Training facilities, forensic labs, police stations. So we're looking into doing our homework right now, and by early to mid next year, we'll have that report for Cabinet, and we'll be able to make a decision whether or not it makes sense to proceed with an Alberta Police Service.
So just off the top of your head, what are some of the advantages of having a provincial police force over the RCMP?
Well, I think the biggest thing you hear is stability, and it's the continuity where you have somebody from your community that's going to be on your police service. Quite often now, the RCMP, they do good work, but quite often they'll have people that aren't from Alberta, and they won't know where the different towns are. They won't know where how the community fabric that brings it all together. They won't have that continuity. The other thing too with the Alberta Police Service is that it'll also allow us to keep people here longer. The RCMP, they send people all over Canada. It'll provide that greater continuity as well.
Some people I've talked to, some of the critics are saying that the advantage of the RCMP, you've got this national database, so it's easy to reach out to different jurisdictions. If somebody's wanted, let's say in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, Halifax, Nova Scotia, we've got this national database, but that's not going to be the case with the provincial police force. It'll be harder because you have to deal with different, police services across the country.
Well, and you know what? This is one of those things that we have technology now that allows databases to talk to each other. It's something that we could very easily figure out. I mean, even in Alberta, we have, you got the Tabor police, you've got Lethbridge, you got Medicine Hat, you have all these different municipal ones, and we find a way to communicate with each other when particularly when you have an individual that is definitely needed to be brought in. So we have a way to communicate with each other. I'm not concerned about our ability to have databases talk to each other.
So Doug, what steps is the province taking to eliminate the shortage of prosecutors?
So we campaigned on bringing in 50 new prosecutors in the province of Alberta. So we're actually actively hiring right now to bring in these additional prosecutors. But it's similar to if you wanted to grow your police service, you have to recruit as well. So we've actually doubled the number of students that we have coming in, so young lawyers that graduated law school, and we're having them go to different communities across Alberta. So we've doubled the capacity, and next year we're actually going to have the largest articling student class in the entire province, larger than any of the private law firms as well, to make sure that every year we bring in more talent to be able to fill our ranks of prosecutors. For too long, we just weren't recruiting enough. And as a result, we kind of had this slow depletion in our ranks of prosecutors where we couldn't keep up with the caseload. So we're changing that strategy. We're also out there hiring more prosecutors as well so we can deal with cases, because the former government under the NDP brought in what they called a triage, where they would just simply drop the non-priority cases. And we've heard loud and clear from Albertans that if the police go through the time to find someone, to charge them, that they want to make sure that the full extent of the law is pursued by our prosecutors. And a lot of that is making sure they have the capacity themselves to handle the caseload.
The COVID-19 pandemic has been a big challenge for many Albertans, many Canadians, and all around the world. But there's still also a big drug crisis in many towns and cities across our province, including here in Lethbridge. Now, our Mayor, Chris Spearman, was saying how much of a need there is for a full-time scan unit in our city to help permanently shut down the drug houses. Because right now, they shut down one and another one opens up three doors down the block, and it's just a vicious cycle. Is one forthcoming?
So on that front there, I mean, we have Scan that provides services. We did shut down a house in Lethbridge earlier this year. We are actually investing though in the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team. This is a coordinated effort between different policing agencies. It's very technical, specific, and they go after organized crime. They've had an immense amount of success as well. So when you see the big busts that get the drugs and the guns off the street, quite often the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team is behind it. And we actually just made a real strategic investment in the Lethbridge area to provide further officers for this team to go after organized crime.
Now, some jurisdictions in the United States have brought forth body cams that local law enforcement have to wear. Any chance we can maybe see mandatory body cams being worn by police throughout the province?
Well, you know what? This is a really interesting technology, and we're doing a consultation right now on the future of the Police Act, as well as the future of police policy in the province of Alberta. And our plan is to have some answers on this later this year and into the fall of next year regarding the future of those areas. But I've seen some of these technologies. I'm not sure if you remember the show Cops back in the day in the 90s, where you'd have them going with the police service, and they'd actually kind of narrate their life. Oh, we're pulling up here. We got a situation. I've seen some of these body camera technologies where the police will actually narrate their life as to what they're doing in the situation to provide better evidence for court. So I got this call, I come in, and it has the ability potentially to create a better accountability for the police, but also better evidence for the courts as well. So we're giving it a serious look right now in the province of Alberta.
Doug, oftentimes when there is a divorce, dads struggle to see their kids. Is it possible to reform family court without the Family Lawyers Association lobbying against it? I mean, apparently it's a billion-dollar business that hurts families and fathers and only benefits lawyers financially.
Well, it's one of those things where we have to make sure that the justice system works for Albertans. And I get letters every single day from parents that are going through a family system right now that is just not working for them. And they feel as though it's actually made their relationship with their children, it's damaged their family unit, even when they're trying to get along with their, their former spouse and trying to find some way to work together. So we were listening to that. And some of the things too is that some of these issues shouldn't be in the court system at all. Like there's ways that you could actually deal with family issues outside of a court process that would probably be far smoother from a process standpoint. It would probably cause less acrimony between the parents as they kind of try and find their new normal. And really, we're looking for some solutions there to help save people money too. Because in many of these instances, the person that profits is the lawyer. And it really should be about what's in the best interest of the family and the kids.
Legal Aid Alberta introduced a new initiative called Advance Appearance Duty Council, which allows people to prepare for court by phone or email instead of making a trip to the courthouse in person. Now, it's temporary until August 28th. Doug, Legal Aid says this was important to have during the pandemic since the Alberta courts reopened. Your thoughts?
You know what? During this pandemic, we've actually had an amazing amount of advancement in technology use, video conferences, different ways that we can get our court system continuing to function in a pandemic. And a lot of these things are actually really useful tools that we should look at keeping for the long term. And I think it also helps level the playing field because quite often legal services get concentrated in Calgary and Edmonton, and the bigger, the Court of Appeal matters, things like that. But by using video technology, there's no reason why a lawyer in Lethbridge or Tabor or Medicine Hat couldn't be able to provide those same services that are provided in the bigger cities. And it helps level that playing field. So we're looking at lots of different ways to keep technology use kind of at a premium in our court system.
Alberta Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer, thanks for joining me today from Calgary.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks so much for watching.